The first day at Harding Academy, 1967. It was the first day of the fall term at Harding Academy. Among the new students was a shy 14-year-old girl named Sarah who was self-conscious about her long, straight brown hair. According to the strict dress code, girls' hair could be no longer than chin length. Sarah was dreading having her locks shorn off, but she dutifully went to the school barber shop. The barber was a stern older man who gestured for Sarah to sit silently in the chair as he fastened a striped cape around her. Without asking how she wanted her hair cut, he grabbed sections and hacked off large chunks with scissors. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears as she felt her hair rain down around her shoulders. The barber kept cutting relentlessly until her hair grazed her chin in a blunt, uneven style. When Sarah saw her reflection, she barely recognized herself. The barber removed the cape brusquely and sent her on her way. Over the next few days, Sarah struggled to adjust to her new look. She avoided mirrors and kept her head down, embarrassed by her choppy, short hair. At the mandatory hair inspection that week, the schoolmaster frowned at Sarah's shaggy cut. He declared it still too long and sent her back to the barber. The barber sat her down and immediately went to work wetting and soaping up her hair. Sarah froze in dismay as he lifted a straight razor to her neck and began shaving off what little hair she had left. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she listened to the scraping of the razor. She dreaded how she would look once he finished removing her hair completely. After what felt like an eternity, the barber stepped back and removed the cape. Sarah shakily reached up and felt only smooth, bare skin covering her head. She left the barber shop bald and broken, mourning the loss of her hair. Sarah was forced to keep her head shaved for the rest of the term, a humiliating punishment for not having her hair short enough initially. She obeyed meekly, never daring to let it grow out again after seeing what defiance brought. Conformity was prized over individuality at Harding Academy. Over the next few weeks, Sarah struggled to adjust to life at Harding Academy with a shaved head. She avoided her reflection, embarrassed by her baldness which made her stand out among the other girls. In class, Sarah tried to focus on her schoolwork, but often found herself self-consciously running her hand over the bristly fuzz covering her scalp. She noticed classmates staring curiously before quickly looking away. At night in the dormitory, Sarah tossed and turned, wishing she could hide beneath long locks. The early morning air chilled her exposed head when the other girls had their hair to warm them. During music class, when they performed in the auditorium, Sarah felt utterly exposed under the stage lights, with her bare scalp visible to the crowd. She longed for the protective veil of hair to hide behind. A month later, Sarah was summoned to the headmaster's office first thing in the morning. Nervously, she entered and stood before his imposing desk. "Sarah, I've called you here because I've been impressed with your obedience and discipline over the past weeks," he began, folding his hands. Sarah stared at the floor silently, unsure of how to respond. "Therefore, I've decided you may start growing your hair out again as a reward for good behavior," the headmaster declared. Joy leapt in Sarah's heart, but she kept her face neutral. "Thank you, sir," she replied politely before being dismissed. Sarah returned to class, running her hand over the dark stubble growing back on her shorn head. After weeks of forced baldness, she was finally allowed to regrow her hair. 2 days later, Sarah's friend Alice was 5 minutes late to English class after chatting too long after breakfast. The headmaster berated Alice for her tardiness and sentenced her to immediately have her long blonde hair buzzed off as punishment. Alice emerged from his office sobbing, her shorn head now clipped down to the scalp. The next morning, Sarah's friend Elizabeth forgot to do her math homework. When the teacher demanded an explanation, Elizabeth snapped, "I left it at home." Overhearing her insolent tone, the headmaster ordered Elizabeth's chestnut waves be cut off as punishment. She was soon reduced to tears as her hair was hacked off, leaving her scalp bare. Later that week, Sarah's roommate Mary was caught passing a mocking note about the teachers. As punishment, Mary's braid was severed and her head fully shaven as she cried. Each time Sarah passed her bald friends in the hall, she felt relieved yet sad for them. She tucked her growing pixie cut behind her ears, not wanting to flaunt her privilege. A month later, Sarah's hair had grown to chin length while her friends still feared the razor's bite for any minor infraction. The threat of haircuts kept them docile. When Sarah's locks finally brushed her shoulders again, she was grateful yet felt guilty seeing her friends suffering. The atmosphere at Harding Academy centered around control and punishment, especially hair removal for girls. Sarah tread carefully to avoid attracting attention. Each morning, the hallways echoed with muffled sobs as girls emerged from inspections with freshly shorn heads for even slight uniform infractions. Their anguished cries followed Sarah to class. During lessons, the teachers often paused their lectures to reprimand girls absent-mindedly touching their shaved scalps. "Hands down and eyes forward," they would bark. At lunch, Sarah kept her eyes down while eating, not wanting to accidentally meet the gaze of a classmate with a newly shaved head who might perceive pity. In the dormitories at night, matrons patrolled vigilantly, doling out consequences for any perceived misbehavior. Girls who stayed up whispering past lights out were taken away and returned with bare, buzzed heads. Once a week, all girls were herded to the barber shop for mandatory cuts, whether their hair complied with rules or not. Sarah winced at the sound of buzzing clippers and cries echoing down the hall. When her friends questioned the strict hair policies, Sarah hushed them quickly. "Don't make trouble, or you'll end up shaved again," she warned, having learned obedience kept one safe. Harding Academy sought to control every aspect of the girls' appearances and behaviors. Sarah kept her growing hair pinned neatly back and followed each rule, hoping to avoid further discipline. Conformity was survival. The barbershop located in the school's dreary basement epitomized Harding's suffocating control. The flickering fluorescent lights and smell of antiseptic created an ominous mood. The barber waited sternly, face set in a permanent scowl. He gestured for each girl to sit silent and still as he fastened the striped cape tightly around them. Pale faces stared back from the mirrors lining the walls, reflecting the girls' dread. The mournful snipping of scissors punctuated by sobs filled the stale air. The barber roughly grabbed sections of hair, hacking off as much length as possible. Buzzing clippers removed any trace of femininity, leaving severed locks scattered across the checkerboard tile floor. When shaving heads bald, the barber tilted chins up callously to bare necks. Ignoring weeping and flinching, he scraped the razor ruthlessly over tender scalps again and again. Girls emerged from the barber chair with heads hung low, clutching shorn tresses or touching bare skin in disbelief. But the barber's stern expression never wavered. The oppressive atmosphere lingered even after leaving the barbershop. Girls walked the halls trying to hide shaved scalps and undercuts, choking back sobs over lost locks. Sarah pinned up her growing hair tightly before each inspection, hoping to satisfy the barber. The looming threat of his shears kept the girls docile and compliant, just as Harding intended. The weekly hair inspections were dreaded by all. The girls lined up silently outside the barber shop, anxiously awaiting their turn. When called, each girl trembled as she took a seat in the ominous barber chair. The instant the cape was secured around their neck, they froze like statues. The barber scrutinized every inch of their hair, searching for any strands out of place. If a section was too long or unpinned, the cutting began immediately. Snip by snip, he would remove any non-compliant hair with large shears. Girls squeezed their eyes shut, willing themselves not to cry as their locks fell. For more serious offenses like braids or curls, the buzzing clippers came out. The barber sheared away all traces of style or femininity, ignoring pleading. When he had shorn enough to satisfy regulations, the barber would dismiss the girl with a stern warning to do better next week. She would escape the chair shaken, clutching shorn tresses. Sarah sat stone still during her turns, head forward, not even breathing it seemed. She kept her growing hair neatly pinned and proper, passing each inspection with silent relief. The threat of the barber's shears constantly loomed over the girls, keeping them obedient. Failure to conform in appearance and behavior meant facing discipline. Harding Academy used haircuts as punishment to assert their control. The barbershop inspections were just another way to instill fear and compliance.